I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Israel marks its Memorial and Independence Days amid war. This week, Israel commemorated its fallen soldiers and victims of terror. Always painful, but especially this year, post the October 7th massacre. And then celebrated its 76th Independence Day. Never before has this been done during a war, and a tough one indeed. All the while, Israel launched an operation in Rafah and continues to battle Hamas throughout the Gaza Strip, with the North seeing its share of escalation, with more soldiers and civilians injured and killed, and cities and homes under continuous attack by Iranian proxy Hezbollah. What does it all feel like in Israel, and where are we headed as the war intensifies? Joining us is Dr. Eric Mandel, our friend, who is presently in Israel. Dr. Mandel is the founder and director of MEPIN, Middle East Political and Information Network. He's a senior security editor at the Jerusalem Report and a prolific writer and speaker, our go-to expert when it comes to the Middle East. Eric, it's a pleasure to have you joining us all the way from Israel. How are you?
I'm doing well, and it's always wonderful being with you, Shahar.
So where are you in Israel, if I may ask?
Well, tonight I am in Tel Aviv. I had a dinner, I was telling, with a mutual friend who's one of the go-to IDF military experts. Tomorrow I'll be in the north. Hopefully I'll be at Northern Command. Today I was in Judea and Samaria with some new battalions and with female combat soldiers. So there's lots happening, and the weather is great.
The weather is great. Well, you know what? At least that during these times. But I want to ask you, like I mentioned in the opening, we commemorated, Israel's Yom HaZikaron memorial service this week and Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, and it was not easy. Even here, far away from Israel, we did it with a heavy heart as the war rages on. What did it feel like for you being in Israel during Memorial Day and Independence Day, if you could share with our viewers?
So Memorial Day is always a difficult day. Here it's a unique day because of October 7th. I asked one of the soldiers I was with in Gaza, who's from the Golani Brigade, and I said, "What are you feeling?" And he says, "I feel Yom HaZikaron every single day since October 7th. So it wasn't just commemorating this of fallen heroes from many, many wars. But Israel is right now a traumatized society. Many people have expressed the way he expressed it, that they're feeling this every day. But it's an amazingly resilient society." And I kept hearing words that people were articulating as I was asking them to feel how do you transition from Yom HaZikaron to Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut? And they were talking about meaning and purpose and what they're doing in their lives and how proud they are doing this. And this is my homeland. And the resolve was incredible. On Yom HaAtzmaut, I had the opportunity.
By the way, where did the siren catch you?
The siren caught me actually by a gas station, and I just was looking at the other people, how everybody just stops. And it's not just standing there and you see thoughts are going through the head because everybody's one degree of separation from somebody they know and what you feel, whether from this war or for other wars. And Israel is a large family. It's something very hard for American Jewry really to relate to. It's interesting. I wrote a piece about this, that we in America have a hard time relating to it. And one of our mutual friend, Gil Troy, wrote to me, he said, "Thanks for writing that article to explain what we Israelis are and what we go through. But yet, they are happier even when they're not can articulate that way because they are living lives that really make a difference. It's something that we should all aspire to. That's what makes life important. On Yom HaAtzmaut, I was with Jerusalem Post and Jerusalem Report fellow editors. We tried to celebrate. There was the usual barbecue, but it was subdued. People went a little bit through the motions, but there was still the talking and discussing of issues. It's an amazing, amazing place, and American Jewry should be incredibly proud to have brothers and sisters in Israel who are really fighting for our homeland and are ethical and moral. And you hear by the conversations, and so it was a unique and special one. And hopefully next year, it'll be one where we have something of joy. By the way, last year, Yom Ha'atzmaut wasn't so happy because of the judicial reform that was going
Right,
on.
right. People forgot those divisions. Yep.
So there was a lot of polarization last year. So we need next year to have a Yom HaZikaron that is more um, not in a war, and a Yom Ha'atzmaut that you can remember that will be year 77, that it's something to celebrate, and the great experiment of Jewish democracy
Right.
returning to the homeland. We could celebrate with a full heart.
I agree with you. What was the mood on the street? Like when you were walking in the streets, what can you say about Israelis as you were walking about? Was there that sense of, solemn moment and sadness, or did people just go about their business as usual? How did you feel it?
He was just subdued on Yom Ha'atzmaut. In Yom HaZikaron, I heard there was a lot more private stories that wasn't on the street. People were commemorating in families, people were going to cemeteries. And I would hear stories that wasn't just about October 7th. Somebody who died I heard a story today, died in 1946, who was with the Irgun, and he had survived the famous Fahud in Baghdad, and came and fought, and the family goes. It's an Iraqi-Israeli family every year, and so the memories go back
Yeah.
generations. Um,
That's the amazing part about our people. We are memory in so many ways. We are memory. And you remind us that even though we mourn iron swords, unfortunately, there are so many episodes that go way back and live, in different families and different people's hearts. So, yeah, what a time to be in Israel. And you're doing so much as you're there, meeting with officials, engaging on the ground. One of the topics that keeps on coming up here in the discussions is the humanitarian aid. We're seeing it going into Gaza. According to some reports, 80% more trucks go into Gaza now than they did on October 6th. What was your sense on the ground? Is humanitarian aid going in? If so, how? And we've seen also Israelis demonstrating against it at different crossings. We've also seen Hamas attacking some of the bases in charge of supplying that aid, like Kerem Shalom. What can you share with us on that issue?
So what you're hearing in the States is not what's really happening. And how do I know this? I knew some of this in previous trips, but in this one, I specifically sought out the officer who's in charge of all the humanitarian aid coming in through every one of the crossings. And the main thing, what you hear the international organizations saying, and the UN and some very hostile, some senators and Congress people,
Right.
is all because Israel's inspection process is slowing things down. That is not even close to the truth. Israel is inspecting them, is transferring them, especially through Kerem Shalom, and it is putting them on the other side for international agencies to be picked up. They are not being picked up. They call them sleeping trucks. They wait there. The day I was there yesterday, there were 100 trucks Israel had inspected that were sitting on the Palestinian side that the international community had not picked up. And who knows how many foodstuffs get spoiled that way? And who will be putting in charge of this? UNRWA and at the Kerem Shalom crossing. And so that is so this idea that Israel's using famine as a weapon of war is so far from the truth. Israel is trying to overwhelm the area so the people can't steal it and loot it and raise the prices. There is enough food in. I asked very specific questions. I went through the statistics with them. There's enough for 2,700 calories per person per day for every one of the 2 million people in Gaza, which is
Wow.
700 more calories than there's normal sustenance of 2,000 calories a day. The water situation, there is enough water. It is problematic to a certain degree because the Gazans got most of their water from their aquifer, and a lot of that is not working well. But Israel has opened up new water pipelines. So they're getting per person today 30 liters per person Pre-war, it was about 70 liters, but more than enough to sustain. So when you hear this, the accusations, the blood libels that Israel is starving and the population, it is absolutely false. The logistics are incredibly complex. But if I have to fault anybody here, besides obviously the people who throw stones at Israel that it's not true, the Israelis are not doing a great job of explaining what's going on. I told them, very simple thing. You have all of these trucks every single day sitting there on the Palestinian side. I said, they have this thing like at the hotel where you can look at the hotel 24/7.
Right.
Put a camera from a drone of all of these trucks every day, day in and day out, that are not being
Well, but
picked up.
Eric, you know very well, unfortunately, how many people are really interested in the facts, which is why, thank God for having you on the ground, giving us those facts and empowering our viewers to know what's really happening. So you're saying that there is enough humanitarian aid going into Gaza and even beyond when it comes to this, by the way, a situation in which, one side is providing supplies for the enemy?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. Do you know that Israel has gotten almost total cellular coverage? So this is some siege and using weapons of war of food and water and technology.
Right.
Israel
Right.
has fixed their whole cellular system. Now, it is not perfect, and there are people where there's food insecurity, in large part because of what Hamas steals and loots, and the international community does not distribute well. But overall, this is a made-up narrative to
It is.
make Israel a pariah nation.
Eric, one of the things that, as all eyes are fixed on Gaza, one of the things that are not discussed here is the situation in Judea and Samaria. And we know that Iran has been funneling a lot of, funds into that area to incite violence against Israel. And God forbid, we know how close these areas are to major cities in Israel. You visited the seam line, Tulkarem, Kalkilia. Give us your impression of what the alert level is there of the IDF and what is the situation vis-a-vis Hamas's establishment in those areas.
So Hamas is in Tulkarem, in Kalkilia. Every year the terror focus changes. One year it's in Nablus, next year it's in Jenin, next year it's in Hebron, and they still, I was with a battalion a few weeks ago in Nablus in Judea area, and there's still obviously so much terror going on from there. But along the seam line, this is the area, especially along the waistline of Israel. It's only 7 or 8 miles wide, where they've created a new battalion that I was with, because Tulkarem has become the terror center where you have Hamas there, and they are now igniting Kalkilia. And I was actually in Kalkilia today, and Hamas is through Iran is paying people they're giving to kids fire bombs or people to video themselves shooting, and they'll give them money. Iran is trying to bring game-changing weapons in there, and I can tell you from the highest sources in Israel that I've spoken with, that one of the reasons, going back, if you remember, when Israel struck those generals in Damascus, is because one of the two game-changing things that Iran did and why Israel wanted to send a message at that time was because Iran was trying to change the quantity and quality of munitions coming into the West Bank. And Israel struck, and then a whole other discussion we can have. Everybody seems to have forgotten about Iran sending ballistic missiles at Israel.
Their evil knows no rest.
What was that?
The Iranian evil knows no rest. They're not resting in undermining and destabilizing the region wherever they touch, from Lebanon to Syria, from Iraq to Jordan, from Yemen to South America. It's unbelievable how central the Islamic Republic is to, evil, terror, and instability in the world.
And we should not be proud of our government, which is not enforcing sanctions on this leading state sponsor of terror. And they are igniting the ring of fire around Israel in Judea and Samaria today. And I think your viewers would be interested. The unit I was with was a combined unit of female and male combat soldiers. It's not the first time I've been with them, but an incredibly amazing group of young people defending the state of Israel there.
How alert did you sense the IDF was in that area? How ready is the IDF in the seam line area?
They are ready all the time. They are stopping terror all the time. There was infiltrations happening all the time, and they got to the point they were having up to 70 a week of infiltrations, that they've now created a whole new fence, a smart fence as opposed to a dumb fence, as they would say, that
Right.
has decreased it. And in Calkilia, because the topography lends itself to it, it is totally surrounded by this new fence, which has made a big difference. Some towns, because of the hills, it's very hard to make that. But again, fence is always not enough. We know about the fence on October 7th.
Right.
So it's an aid, but not a cure.
You're correct. Eric, as part of your travels through the Holy Land, you also got to visit the Netzarim crossing that dissects the Gaza Strip north to the south. Tell our viewers a little bit about what is that crossing, what is its importance, and what did you see on the ground in Gaza?
So basically, yeah, when I look in and I see, you still see lots of devastated buildings. This particular crossing, I call it Gate 96. And this is another entrance for humanitarian aid that comes in, just so people know. In the south, you have Kerem Shalom. You have in the north two in Erez in the north. And by the way, these are areas that Hamas attacked, destroyed, yet Israel reopened. Kerem Shalom, Israel reopened in the south, it should mention, but Hamas attacked it and killed 4 Israeli soldiers, I believe, last week. But yet Israel reopened it and bringing in humanitarian aid. So anyhow, this crossing is basically supposed to control that Israel can do special operations to the north and to the south. And we know that they're very active now. They're back in the Jabalia area and some other areas in the Gaza City area, which they had supposedly taken over, but Hamas has infiltrated back. And so this line that goes east to west from the Mediterranean to Israel, it's basically to screen people coming back and forth, and as a source for operations. The Nahal brigade was there for a while, but now more units have come in, especially as the slow and meticulous Rafah operation is slowly going on. And that is something everybody needs to keep their eye on, because there's criticism even before anything happens.
Right. There was criticism of Israel 2 days after the October 7th massacre, before we even began eradicating Hamas's capabilities. Eric, how important, in your view, and for the sake of our viewers, is the operation in Rafah, is taking care of Hamas's battalions in Rafah and getting the job done? Why is it so important?
So did we stop in trying to destroy ISIS after we had destroyed 80%? No, you need to destroy as much infrastructure that as you can to keep them on the run. But let's be totally honest. There will be an insurgency that will rise up. The most of the tunnel network, even in the north, has not been destroyed. So Israel, and again, this is people are not being frank, Israel is going to need to control for a significant amount of time Gaza, like it controls Judea and Samaria, until a transition can occur to a Palestinian government, a reform PA of whatever it is, that of course doesn't have Islamists like Hamas, but also doesn't have the corruption of the current Palestinian Authority, and that's going to take years. So to say that Israel's never going to win this war, this type of war with radical Sunni Islam backed by Shiite Iran Islam, is going to go on a long time, and it's going to go on a long time until we put enough pressure to the Iranian regime collapses. And then all of these dominoes would move positively in a better direction for American national security, Israel, and really the
The
world.
world. You know, you were mentioning the situation and the complexity of the situation, and I think it's important to note that Hamas is using its tactics, of using civilians as human shields very, very successfully in twisting Israel's arm into supplying it with solar and fuel, water and food, in making sure that the world keeps on focusing on Israel, and in guaranteeing that Israel is not, it's fighting with not one hand, but two hands tied behind its back. My question to you, Eric, and with your perspective of understanding these issues, aren't we sending a message to terrorist organizations across the world that if only they hide behind civilians and human shields, they can get away with murder?
Yes, that you're absolutely correct. You know, Israel's been accused of war crimes. Let's, listen, I hate to always say this, but of course, if innocents die anywhere, that is always a tragedy. But as I've seen firsthand how Israel responds to avoid civilians, Israel in kills, unfortunately, 1.5 civilians for every terrorist it kills. The statistics for America and for almost every other country in the world that fights, especially in asymmetric wars, is 9-1. Israel should be commended for how much it has saved civilians, considering they are purposely put in harm's way to manipulate successfully the world. And unfortunately, our current administration has lost the ability. And we in the West are always saying the war is long enough, but the timeline of Sunni radical jihadism and Shiite radical jihadism is in centuries. And when Israel is pressured in 7 months to complete a war where there's 300 miles of underground tunnels and where human shields are, where civilians are used as human shields, and you can't differentiate between civilians and combatants or terrorists, all war crimes, it's going to take time. And I think Israel operationally has done a good job, but the question is, when is it going to end? It will end in the next phase if Rafah is taken down and you can control the Philadelphia corridor, the bringing in of arms, the continual arms that have come in from Egypt. We are silent about Egypt's complicity in allowing arms to come in, and we have been silent about the Egyptians not taking in their fellow Muslim Arabs into their country to escape harm's way. There's a one-way street that's been going on, and it's blaming Israel, which is not perfect, but it's operationally, tactically an important war. Strategically, there's many more discussions. The discussion is the North. The discussion is
Right.
Gaza.
But Eric, I don't want to make it too difficult, but I really do want to ask you something that's troubling a lot of our viewers. We've seen the IDF operating heroically across Gaza, fighting an impossible war against the most vile creatures on the face of this earth. At the same time, we're seeing the IDF now re-entering areas where it already supposedly operated and cleared. In the recent week or two, we've seen again a rise in the rockets fired into the south of Israel, specifically the Israel envelope, formerly known as the Gaza envelope, and the area of Sderot. What's happening? Is this going to keep on happening? We're going to go in, we're going to go out, things are going to go back to the way they were, and the IDF is going to go in. How do you see that situation?
It's going to go on a long time. That's why I said what's going to happen is the insurgency there is going to continue. Their infrastructure is still intact. There are thousands of terrorists hiding in tunnels below ground in the center and in the north. And it's going to take a very long time to dismantle us. They've built this over 17 years.
Correct.
And
People forget that. 17 years they have built this infrastructure. Very true.
And so it's not going to go away. So Israel, if you listen carefully, when they said we have operational control over ground in the past, but these things pop up periodically, and they are going to. There's no way around it. Instead, unless Israel took every single person, put them into Egypt or somewhere, and then basically carpet bombed the whole Gaza Strip down, 100 meters down. And that's not going to happen. And so, the pressure of Israel to return civilians back to areas where they were, to have international monies come in and rebuild them. But Hamas, which goes from civilians to terrorists back and forth and is hiding, and their ideology is about killing Jews. You're not going to kill that ideology, but you can put it on the run. So what does victory mean here? Victory means, for me, that Gaza is under control, like Judea and Samaria under control. But in Judea and Samaria, you heard me saying there are every single day, and people don't know this, why Judea and Samaria seem quiet. Every single day, IDF troops with Shin Bet go in and extract terrorists And you don't hear about that. You only hear about when the terror happens, and that's going to happen to a certain degree. But
Right.
also accumulation of mortars and other missiles, it will periodically occur into the Gaza envelope, even when people occur.
You
But
know,
people,
Eric, Israel is fighting a tough war. But like you so astutely mentioned, and it's important for our viewers to understand that point that you were making, this untenable situation has been happening on and off for 17 years. And the people of the South, and to a degree also in other parts of Israel, continuously lived under and got used to the threat of rockets. That's unacceptable. So even though this is a tough war, there is a need to once and for all retain some sort of normalcy against an empire of evil that has risen before our very eyes and under our very noses.
right? I mean, the West, certainly America, should stand with Israel, and as it continues to subdue, and look for possibilities for Palestinian leaders who are untarnished by corruption and terrorism. And and when they do come up, those people disappear very quickly. It's going to take time. This magical thing of people pushing to a two-state solution at this point of time is unrealistic. I think people need to start talking about what the possible is. The possible Israel needs to survive, to have security, to make sure it is in control of those areas, and then to create a vision where Palestinians could take control of their lives. But right now, they have not earned that at this point because
They
of
have they have not earned that. And I love it that you say it like it is. If there is one lesson we have from October 7th is it's time to look reality in the eye and say it. They have not earned that. And that's very true.
yeah,
Um,
there's
you're
the
going
people.
up north tomorrow. You're going up north, right? For the rest of your
Yes.
visit?
Hopefully, I'll be in Northern Command tomorrow, and I will be Ros Hanikra, where there's been incidents, and it depends upon which battalions and what's because it continually changes based upon the operational changes. The North is hot. The North has remained hot. It has gotten worse. The question is, when will Israel be able to return its almost 100,000 citizens back north? They don't want to go back. If the Radwan, the Hezbollah, is within meters of them, there's been an acceptance supposedly by Israel to have them only moved a relatively short distance, 10 kilometers north, which just barely puts them out of anti-tank range, which has been the killer weapon in this war, where they should be north of the Litani River, as was promised by the United Nations Security Council. So the question in the north is, one, does Hezbollah want a war? Or maybe that's the wrong question. Does Iran want Hezbollah, which is totally under control, to have a
Or
war?
and I'm so because every time we speak it's like 20 seconds. Maybe it's time for Israel to make up its mind. What does Israel want, Eric? That's going to
Um,
be, I think, an interesting subject to hear from you when you come back to the States. And I'm sure this has been a fruitful visit. I want to thank you for the time that you've given us to share your perspective and insights on, especially during such a week. As always, these insights are tremendously helpful to help us learn a lot right here and for all of our viewers. Just travel safe and take care of yourself. And we can't wait to see you soon.
I'll give you an update from my meetings in the Knesset and with some of our mutual friends like Danny Ailon.
We look forward to having you back on JBS soon. And thank you again for taking the time to share all of this with us. And to all of you, our viewers, we'll continue to keep you updated as things move forward in Israel and across the world. That's why we're here. And this is our commitment to you as JBS. May we see better times soon. I'm Shahar Azani, and thank you all for watching.